there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're back with a couple more interesting topics. I'm very excited for yours.
Cool.
Hopefully you'll enjoy mine. It'll be fun. This will be fun, guys. We are a podcast that talks about scary-ish topics, whether that's true crime, hauntings, fascinating science. It's all a good time.
Yeah, we hope. If it's not, then you wouldn't be listening to us. But we think it's going to be a good episode. Robin, what are you covering this week?
I'm going to be covering the Chelsea Hotel.
Cool. I'm going to be covering the third man syndrome. So it's interesting. I found it fascinating when I was doing research on it. So I hope you guys feel the same way. Before we get into that, I got to go ahead and remind everyone it's January, which means it's January Patreon push, which means we spend a little time at the beginning of each show for the month of January to ask you to go to patreon.com/scaryish podcast and sign up. It's a monthly donation that comes to us. It really helps us out, makes the podcast keep on going. And for as little as $1, you can become a patron, which really, really does help. You might think, Adam, it's just $1. Well, just $1 from a lot of folks adds up, and it helps us with hosting fees, equipment, all the things that we need to make sure we can keep this podcast moving forward. And in return, for just a single $1 you get 48 hours early access to episodes, 36 to 48. We've been really good about doing it at 48, though. I'm pretty proud of us.
We also have a couple of actually exclusive like storytime videos that we've uploaded, I think.
Yeah, they're 2 in like 6 years, so
yeah,
I
said a couple.
I'm just saying it's not like consistent. But the other thing that you get for every single episode is ad-free. So you get to listen to it 48 hours early, and there's no ads in it. And regardless, you can go back through the catalog and listen to every episode we've ever done on Patreon, and those will be ad-free as well. So pretty cool. And then as you go up the ranks, like $3, I think we have a $5, was a $10.
Yeah.
There's additional bonuses and benefits. I think $3 you get to help us choose when we post polls and we say, hey, what should we have as our topic?
We've done a bad job at that too.
At $10, we send out gifts to you. We send like a keychain or an ornament. We just sent out ornaments, I think, for the Christmas
Yeah, but usually
season.
It's like a sticker, a magnet, or something like that. It's always a handwritten note by me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
And $25, you get everything that came before it, plus a shout out at the beginning of every month on the first episode. So lots of stuff. So go check that out. Sign up. It really does help us out. We would appreciate it. Patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. So yeah, there's the JPP stuff. Being kind of a slow January Patreon push this year. Sometimes it just explodes, and sometimes it doesn't.
Adam was saying it's because he's been really quiet this year. He usually yells or adds sounds and music.
Yeah, I have like air horns and stuff like that. Last year I did like the echo and the vibrato, and I actually went into this Chat GPT thing I've been working on, and I tried to get it to make me a theme song, like a jingle for January Patreon push. And one of them wrote music, and then the other one was supposed to make like vocals for it. And the vocals were so stupid, and the music was so incomplete. Honestly, if anyone thinks AI is going to be taking over the world, it's not happening anytime soon. Trust me. But yeah, January Patreon push, people. Let's do this together. But cool. You haven't heard our voices since last week at the same time. Not a lot has happened in our lives. It's been pretty quiet. Still recovering from illness, but I think we're like fairly better. I think Robin kind of relapsed a little bit this week.
I relapsed for sure. I'm still dealing with goop. So Robin, that's a fun time.
I am curious how many folks do this, because I talked about this with people at work. So when I'm sick...
This is going to be real gross, okay?
When I'm sick, I'm going to try and put it in the least gross terms. Like if I have a fluid that's dripping from a face hole, I try and expel that so I don't have it in my face holes anymore. And then Robin doesn't. Robin, like, yeah, I'll give you like tissues so you can wipe your runny nose. But aside from that, I hear a lot of like snorting, like you're trying to keep it all in. And I'm just like, no, that's your body's way of getting rid of the infection. Get that stuff out. But yeah, I talked to coworkers this week about it. And it's like everyone has like 40 to 50% of the people in their household that do that instead of like blowing their nose or whatever. And I was just like, why is it like this? I could have sworn you're supposed to get all the fluids out of you while you're drinking plenty of water to replenish what you're expelling. But I don't know. Like me and Robin are polar opposites.
In Asian countries, I don't think people blow their nose in public very often. It's
good thing it's the privacy of our home.
I know, but like, it's just something that I feel like I always just do that. I don't think...
I think it's so much worse.
I don't think growing up, a lot of us like blew our noses very often. I think it was a lot of keeping it in. But
That's
I don't
just
know. I don't remember.
Odd to me. But anyways, that's what we're going through. Not a whole lot, obviously. Just enjoying playoff football and playing some video games.
Video games.
That's about it. And yeah, pretty normal stuff.
Yeah,
so.
I just started a game called Love in Deep Space. So if anybody out there plays it, let me know, because those boys in that game are hot.
Wow. I had Glitch, actually, the Scaryish famous moderator Glitch, reach out to me, and he's like, "Are y'all gonna play Pal World?" And I was like,
"Oh, we do own
I
that
don't
game.
know what that is. Thank you for spoiling the story."
Oh.
And he's like, "It's like Pokemon with guns." So I checked it out. It's early access, which means it's not obviously going to be in perfect condition, but it was also super cheap. It was like $25, and I was expecting it to be 60. So I just bought one for me and one for Robin so we can play it together and maybe stream it. Who knows? I wouldn't mind doing a video game stream or something like that. But yeah, we'll see how that winds up. So thank you for letting us know, Glitch. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move into my topic. And this week I took a topic suggestion from a spooky friend. I have to say, she's my favorite spooky friend.
You have a favorite spooky
She's the
friend?
hottest as well. Obviously, I'm talking about Robin.
Oh!
If you thought it was anyone else, take 1,000 cool points away from yourself, including you, dude.
Yeah, I sent it to you on Instagram.
Yeah, she sent me a reel about something that was really creepy and interesting and possibly supernatural or scientific or both. So shout out to Robin. I am covering third man syndrome. Your first question is probably, what the fuck is third man syndrome? It's also referred to as third man factor, or in philosophical debate, the third man argument. So if that helps, which it probably doesn't, you probably still have no clue what I'm talking about. No, it's not like the sixth man in basketball, which is an award they give to the best bench player.
Man?
The 12th man is technically the crowd, the home crowd at football stadiums.
Yep.
I had a friend who told me, like, there's no such thing as home field advantage. I was like, oh, contraire. You've clearly never been to a game at Lucas Oil Stadium where the crowd is silent during the offense so that people can call out audibles and everyone can hear.
Isn't it?
And then super fucking loud when the opposing offense is trying to call a play where they can't hear each other in the huddle.
Is that Seattle?
No. Lucas Oil Stadium is in Indianapolis. They used to have a sign that says offense and operation quiet, please.
Okay.
Because Peyton Manning trained the crowd like, hey, everyone shut the fuck up when I'm on the field. And then when they put the defense on the field, the crowd would just scream continuously. Seattle, though, they're incredibly loud. Kansas City is also very loud. I thought
Seattle Stadium is actually built in a way where
it's acoustically built to funnel the sound to the field. Yeah. Which is brilliant. So,
don't they hold like the record for like...
They did. It goes back and forth between them and the place Arrowhead, which is where the Chiefs play.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And that's like not built for that. Those fans are just crazy fucking loud. Seattle they're the ones that like took the 12th man phrase and then made it like a celebration at the beginning.
You can get a jersey.
Yeah. So anyways, no, it's not like that. It is not like the 12th man or the 6th man. So it's also not like the last person who's included in a throuple, who probably goes through some sort of like psychological anguish, like, do they really want me as part of this throuple?
Okay.
That would be fascinating though to have as a topic if you have like a sexy podcast out. So like, yeah, Sexy-ish or something like that. I would like to hear about the psychology of this.
Soft launch to your new
I've been
podcast.
soft launching a movie podcast for 5.5 years, so hell no. But okay, picture this. You're stranded on Mount Everest and your GPS isn't working all of a sudden. You're not exactly sure where you are. All you can really tell is up and down. And you're scared. And while you're scared, you just sense someone with you. And you feel kind of calm. You know there's someone there and it creeps you out. And when you look around, you know there's someone that's not there. It's like it's just sort of made up. Like there's an extra person there with you. And it's not whoever you took up there with you, who's probably just like taking a selfie with a snowman. It seems like someone else just arrives in some sort of unknown manner, and it just like relieves you of stress. It might be so freaky to you that you can't actually find who this person is. It's just like the presence of someone there that you're more scared than you are calmed. But it's like at least something is happening to try and calm you down and move you forward. It's like a defense mechanism almost to calm you down, since your GPS is trying to turn you into a cautionary tale instead of an inspiration to people.
Okay.
That's what third man syndrome is. And it's a really weird example, and I'm going to give you some specific examples of stuff that's actually happened. But essentially, it's an invisible presence that joins you in extreme situations.
Like a guardian angel type thing?
That's what a lot of people think of it as. It's like the way that the medical community and the philosophical community outside of like theology refers to like a guardian angel or some like force or divine presence, maybe not even divine, but just additional like presence there, that's like there to comfort you or calm you. Like we've mentioned this before in like other things that we've covered on the show, but we've only circled around it, never given it a name. Like we've had tons of homegrown horrors where people talk about unseen presences being felt. A lot of times, like I wasn't threatened by it. It felt more like it was a calming or nurturing presence. Sometimes like it's like during times of extreme stress or sorrow, like someone feels there's a presence there and they assume it's their loved one that passed, that they're in the process of mourning, you know? Mm-hmm. So in like the face of danger, our brain projects out what it feels like is an accompanying presence to us. And it's not always the same thing for everyone. And I really want to stress that because the first example I give is similar, but it's also pretty fucking scary to the person that it happened to. And while they didn't feel threatened by it, they were certainly creeped the fuck out because they were like, what is happening right now? The effect that may be had is different across the board, basically. But it's easiest to think of as an imaginary friend for a grown-up. Like your brain is just like, we're just going to have an imaginary friend there, but they're invisible. But you can feel them there, which is what you really need. Like we as a people are aware of the fact that the human mind is capable of crazy things. Like it's really hard when you're a child to grow up and be told like, oh, your brain can repress memories, you know? Like you could have a repressed memory right now and not know it because your brain was like, this is horrible. We're going to delete this and put this in the trash bin. We're not going to do a full delete though, so that way it can be brought up when some future trauma triggers it, or maybe hypnosis or something like that. And that's shit that actually happens, which is bizarre. Like you can have a dissociative episode while something horrible is happening to you, you know? Mm-hmm. Like you just disconnect from it so you don't have to experience the horror of it in real time. And it's even possible for your mind to fracture your personality into multiple folks where like one personality doesn't really know what the other one is up to. And I should say as a side note, split personality disorder is exceedingly rare. And in a lot of the medical community thought to be faked in just about nearly every documented scenario. It's not that they don't think it exists. It's just that they think most of the cases were people basically fucking faking it, which is very interesting. And that's like kind of a separate topic. But this is all to say the human mind is capable of doing very profound and powerful things that literally alter your perception and the reality in which you live.
Yes.
So keep that in mind as I go through this. So it kind of kicks in when you're in a moment of extreme stress, and it's like your brain realizing there's something wrong, calling for backup. But instead of backup actually arriving, like it's just an NPC that gets cooked up, but there's no like actual face, which I like that example because when you dream, it's like there's all these people in your dreams that you've never really met. And people like theorize like, oh, it's people that you've like walked by during the day that become NPCs in your dream. But it's like, really your brain is just placing characters in your dream as like placeholders, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's almost the same thing, except without the body that you can see. It's just the feelings of another person being there. So I think that for me makes sense.
Is this different from imagining somebody you want to be there? Like
it's not an active imagination thing where you're deliberately projecting out like someone being there because you miss them or you're lonely or you want someone to talk to. This is like your brain doing it on its own, like to send you an assist versus like you doing it to make yourself feel less lonely. Is okay. I think the best way that I can answer that.
I'm just imagining. You remember in Outlander?
No.
When they're trying to...
I barely ever watch Outlander, dude. I walk in, someone's being raped, and I'm like, this show sucks, and I walk out.
Okay, when they're trying to break Jamie, right? And then he's imagining, you know, the love of his life is there instead of, you know, what's going on with him. Is it something like that where you just like...
I don't know the example you're talking about, but I guess... So that's basically what we're going to be talking about. And for me, my first question when I heard about third man syndrome, outside of is this real, was how? I really wanted to know, like, what's the scientific or medical explanation as to how your brain does this? Because I still don't understand how your brain represses memories. You know, to me, it just seems like something we say, but it's also something that you know is true because it happens to so many folks, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, we all know that PTSD exists. You know, where like a single traumatic event or sometimes like continuous exposure to something that would trigger a fight or flight response that's like extremely terrifying to a person, where they just become acclimated to it, can leave some sort of lasting issue like in the future that can be triggered by different things that remind you of said traumatic event or just crop up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like that's something that we've all become like acutely aware of, especially in my lifetime. Whereas like in World War II times, they just kind of referred to it as like, oh, they're shell shocked from war, which basically just meant like, oh, they're fucked up. And that's how they diagnosed people with PTSD back in the day. Whereas like, oh, there's something wrong with them and we don't really talk about it. Nowadays, we understand it a whole lot more because it's not just folks that go into like a combat scenario. It's folks that have like horrible traumatic events that happen in their lifetime that's not necessarily related to just being a soldier. And like PTSD is something that's very real. This almost seems like it's a defense mechanism to prevent that, where your brain's like, if I'm going to do something weird, I'm going to try and help you out. You know, that's what it reads like to me. So what could cause this is like what I think of when I think of this. And I looked up a lot of this. So there's three primary trains of thought when it comes to where third man syndrome comes from. And it's not shocking that when people describe third man syndrome, like I did earlier, a lot of folks outside the scope of science or like medicine tend to lean towards the guardian angel theory. Like you already mentioned that sounds like a guardian angel, which it does. Like it sounds exactly like people would feel if they're describing an experience with what would be considered a guardian angel. Like, and I've always thought about like, what if you were doing something or you were in a place that was absolutely going to result in your death, you know?
Yeah.
And if a guardian angel was somehow real, it's not just going to be able to stand in front of you and deflect the bullets. It's going to have to try to like get you to leave that situation, you know? And like a feeling of intense dread and urgency from an unseen force would be at the very least really fucking scary. Like it might compel you to leave. Absolutely. And like, cool, the job is done. That doesn't mean that your guardian angel didn't just scare the fucking shit out of you, you know? So I've always thought of that. And like the cultural and religious interpretation of third man syndrome is in many cases like, obviously, guardian angel, spiritual being, divine intervention are the things that come to the table when you talk about it a lot. Or things like an ancestor that protects your family. Like if it's something that's happened to multiple people and they're communicative enough to their family to say like, this happened to me when I was, you know, younger, and then it happens to someone else. Like, oh, that's our family's guardian. Like it's one of our ancestors protecting us type of thing. So, you know, that's like the cultural and religious interpretation when it comes to third man syndrome a lot. Which doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just a different way to describe it. And then there's like the psychological explanation, which is, you know, in high stress or survival situations where your brain is under extreme pressure, it conjures up a coping mechanism. And this is just the name we give to it. And it can manifest in this sort of like imagined presence, which helps you not feel alone. Like you already mentioned, like sometimes you do it to yourself. Like if you're just bored, you talk to yourself in the mirror, like it's a different person, or you talk to your pets, like they can understand you and respond to you. You talk to plants or whatever. Yeah. You know, but this is like different because it's involuntary. And it's basically to give you what you need to overcome the challenge that you're dealing with. And that's like the psychological explanation. And then there's the neurological cause. So the neurological cause is when they're studying it from a perspective of like medicine and what can happen. Not to say that like a psychological experience isn't necessarily medicine. It's just a different level of understanding, you know, like versus like what your mind can do versus like the chemistry to your brain, you know? Yeah. And neurologically, some like neuroscientists suggest that it might be due to neurological activity in certain brain regions responsible for self-awareness or spatial reasoning. And I've heard like experiments done with this where they try and do experiments to people to stimulate a part of their brain that's normally not stimulated or overstimulated to like give them the presence that there's someone else in the room with them when they're sitting in a place that's alone. Okay. And in a lot of cases, people say they think that there was something divine in there with them because they're at ease, but they didn't feel alone. And it's been studied in a few different universities. I can't remember exactly which ones, but I saw it on not Sightings, but it was another like paranormal show where they're like, we are going to put this person into a room. They're totally by themselves. They have like electrodes cooked up to their brains and whatever. And they're going to monitor their brain activity and give them different stimuli until they get to the point where they notice activity and just keep them there and then bring them out like 10 minutes later and ask them like, what did you feel? And in a lot of cases, they're like, I felt like there was an angel in there with me, or like, I felt like God was in the room with me. And like, they're trying to simulate that through this exact like theory of there's something in your brain that's in charge of self-awareness and spatial awareness that may activate or may malfunction due to stress or fatigue, which is what happens in a lot of cases where it's like, we're going to go through some of these, but people are just basically in really terrible situations. So they have massive stress or fatigue or both. And because that's happening, it creates this sense of another being's presence. I think that's a very convenient explanation of like, oh, okay, cool. You've medically figured out what happens in the brain to give a person exactly what they need to not die in that moment and to keep moving forward with their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So cool. That's the how. That's not the why. I don't think you could ever really know the why. But it basically all three suggest it's a defense mechanism. Whether or not it's external, where a guardian angel shows up and they're like, I got your back. Or internally, where your brain's like, I'm going to help you out. I'm not going to tell you I'm doing this, but I'm going to do this. So the guy who really put the name to it, as far as I know, even though people kind of always have known this is around, is a guy named John Geiger. He published a book in 2009 called The Third Man Factor. And that book covers a lot of the phenomenon and examples of when it has happened throughout history and like events that have happened where people talked about stuff like this.
It's kind of crazy that it's gone so far back in time that people have been looking into this specific thing.
I think it's just such a common thing for people to talk about when they say like powerful religious experiences, or for people who are atheists, like very like terrifying moments where they felt like there was some sort of like different presence in the room with them, that someone's just like, I want to gather this together and put it into a book. I'm sure there's been names for it before, and this is just the one that we kind of know it as today.
Okay.
But yeah, he's the guy in 2009 who kind of got this specific term kicked up and put some stuff out there. It's kind of funny because I wasn't able to find his book where I normally do, which is archive.org, which is just like the giant internet library. It wouldn't let me check it out, but I was able to find this super expansive preview on like Google Books.
Okay.
Where I was able to read a bunch of chapters. I was like, oh my God, this is so much more helpful than I thought it would have been. So shout out to Google Books. The first thing I want to cover that he talks about in his book is some events that happened during the Transglobe expedition. If you hear Transglobe expedition and think, why does that sound familiar? It might be because it was referenced directly in The Fall of the House of Usher.
Really?
They mention it as spoilers. Skip ahead 30 seconds if you haven't watched Fall House of Usher and you don't want a minor spoiler. Mark Hamill's character is referenced by the main character and says like, oh, we keep him around. He's done a lot of stuff. He went around the world during the Transglobe expedition in the early 80s, and he's seen crazy shit. And then near the end of the season, he talks to whatever this thing is that gave them their wish, you know? And she remembers him because when he was on the top of the world, they saw these bizarre entities emerging from the planet.
Oh my God.
And
okay.
she's like, I remember you looked at me and I looked right back at you. So the Transglobe expedition is that thing they referenced. And just because I'm telling you that doesn't mean you know what the Transglobe expedition actually was. So I'll tell you that now. Hopefully 30 seconds has passed. It was an expedition that started in 1979, so not terribly long ago. Like our parents were definitely alive in 1979. And it lasted for 3 years. It was 1979 to 1982, or 1981, I think. And it was basically someone saying like, hey, let's go around the world. And a bunch of people said, yeah, like with modern technology in 1979, that should be a blast. And then that person that originally said it was like, yeah, let's go up though. And everyone else was like, oh, all right. And it was actually the first expedition to go around the world to circumvent the globe, following the Greenwich Prime Meridian, which is the first prime meridian. If you don't know that, like the prime meridian is a line that goes up and down. That's like the middle of the eastern and western hemispheres. So on one side is the eastern hemisphere, the other side is the western hemisphere, and it's in the middle of the Atlantic, if I'm not mistaken. So it might be the Pacific. I'm pretty sure it's the Atlantic. I haven't checked this in a very long time. The Greenwich Prime Meridian was when they thought up the idea of, okay, so the world's round. Let's divide it into hemispheres. And they said, well, obviously, like England's the center of the world. So the prime meridian should run through our country. And it did.
I mean, that's why they have GMT, right?
That's exactly why. Greenwich Mean Time is basically 0. So like, I think Pacific time is -9 or something along those lines to Greenwich Mean Time. And Greenwich Mean Time is based off of the Greenwich Prime Meridian. So some fucking guy basically said, hey, this imaginary line we made up a long time ago, let's follow it in one direction until we come all the way back around and are standing where we left. And they said, fuck it, let's do it. And they fucking did it. And that's 100% true. That's not something made up. It's not science fiction. It's not something for Fall of House of Usher. It's a historical event that happened that people just fucking talk about. And they talk about it because some weird shit happened while they did it. So the guy who was the leader of this expedition was a guy named Sir Randolph Fiennes, which really sounds like Rafe Fiennes.
I was going to say. Really?
I don't know if they're related. I didn't look into it, but he was like, this expedition is going to take a long time, so I can't be without my wife, and I want her to come. So
Aw,
he brought her.
that's so romantic.
His wife came with. Her name was Virginia, and they called her Ginny for short. And she was their radio operator. She was like their communications officer. This wasn't a military operation, but she was in charge of making sure communication with base camps and like basically everyone around the world to let them know where they were and how they were doing was fully functional at all times. So it's a very important fucking job. And so they went up to start, which means they got to the Arctic and they got over that and they're like, holy shit, that was cold. And then they crossed over land and sea and went straight down the prime meridian on the other side of the planet until they got to Antarctica, which is the fucking continent no one ever goes to, you know? I have a boss who's hit 5 of 7 continents on this planet. Antarctica is one of them, and I think the other one is Africa. You guys don't give a shit, but I think it's impressive. I've only been to 2. Yeah. Asia and this one.
You've never been to South America?
No, Mexico doesn't count.
No, that's not.
So still North America, but we're going to Europe later. Anyways, so they got to Antarctica. They started crossing it. And here's the fucking thing about Antarctica is that it's cold as shit. It's on the other side of the planet than the one I reside in, which is the northern hemisphere. So the seasons are swapped. So they got down there and they're like, okay, cool. We've crossed a decent portion of Antarctica and the winter is hitting. And the winter basically has incredibly high winds, frigid freezing temperatures that will kill you if you're out in them for too long, and just a constant blizzard essentially. So they had to stop and wait out the storm. So they took their mobile base camp where they would like carry all their shit with them, set up camp every day or every night or whatever, and then they'd sleep in those, and they just made it permanent. They staked it down, they reinforced it to allow them to stay in place till the bad weather passed, which in Antarctica can take up to 8 fucking months.
What?
Because it's the bottom of the world. Like, there's going to be months of just perpetual night where the only thing that illuminates the sky is the northern lights, which in this case is the southern lights. And this camp that became permanent while they were waiting for the storm to pass was known as Rivingen Camp. If the weather knocked out their communications, they'd be fucked, basically. If anything went wrong, they'd be fucked. And it was Ginny's job to make sure that didn't happen. So if anything happened where the communications were malfunctioning, she would have to go to the Radio Shack or the Radio Hut or whatever you want to call it.
Radio Shack.
And if she was like in the habitat that they like all basically hung out in, the one that had their beds and shit like that, she would open the door. And I've seen clips of this. I've seen Antarctica clips where it's just fucking howling wind and snow. And they had a guideline between all their buildings, and you'd like hook your fucking wire to the guideline. And she'd have to go up to the radio hut and figure out what was wrong. And it was always something on the outside of it. So she'd have to have a fucking flashlight in her mouth while she was like clearing off all the snow, repairing whatever it was fast enough before the snow covered it again.
What a badass.
And then covering it to make sure it wouldn't be exposed to the elements. And that's what she did. That was her fucking job, which is already pretty fucking scary, like straight up scary and dangerous. And so she's doing that stuff. And, you know, she's kind of creeped out about the fact that they're basically in perpetual darkness and their lives are on the line. But outside of that, things seem fairly normal. And then a member of their expedition told her one day that he had gone to the generator to check and make sure that shit was good to go, was coming back to the habitat, and he heard footsteps following him outside. And there was no one else out there.
So it's like
he couldn't see anyone, but he could hear someone walking behind him. The guy was named Oliver Shepard. If you don't believe me, if you think I'm making it up, you can go ask him. He might be dead. This is like 50 years ago. Oliver did state when they asked him, like, tell us more, that he felt like it was just his imagination, but nonetheless, he was very spooked. He thought it was very scary. On a different night, Ginny was coming back from checking something outside, and upon entering the habitat, she said to her husband, quote, "There is something here." End quote.
Like she felt an entity.
Like there's something here that's not us. And Ginny's husband, Rudolph or Randolph or whatever, was like, nah, baby. But Ginny continued and she stated, like, I don't mean a danger. This is exactly actually what she said. This is a quote. I don't mean a danger, but a strong presence. End quote. So she's like, it's not hostile, but it's strong and it's here and I feel it. And other people did too.
Yeah.
And it was really scaring them. And it wasn't the only time she would feel it either. By June, which is like dead set winter because it's the other side of the planet, she felt it even stronger. And she didn't think it was malicious, but its presence was frightening her. She stated, quote, "It came round behind the Radio Shack and followed me back down the tunnel," end quote, for that incident in June. So she didn't just feel like it was there, but it was following her.
Okay.
And multiple people thought it was following them as well. Randolph believed, he didn't objectively state whether or not he thought she was telling the truth or not. It was irrelevant to him. What she felt was valid, and he understood that it scared her. So what he did state was that she was scared, and he believed that her fear came from the idea that she would actually eventually see whatever this thing was. And that was going to scare her the most. By October, the storm is still happening. They are still stuck here. So this is 4 months later. She was hearing noises in the dark. Other people heard stuff too and were very creeped out. She specifically, like, I want you to imagine pitch black, wind blowing at like 80 miles an hour, like hurricane winds, snow whipping in your face. You're covered in every layer you can get to. You're following a guide wire from hut to hut so you don't wander off and die.
And she just hears
and
something.
she hears a baby crying in the darkness.
No, fuck that.
And she's just like, there's something wrong. Like,
why
this is
a baby?
fucked up. It's really scary.
Why a baby?
So she just hears a baby out in the darkness crying, and she swore while this was happening to her, she could hear someone directly behind her whispering. Whatever they were saying was indiscernible, but she could hear someone behind her whispering.
That's creepy.
So she was getting very, very upset.
This does not seem guardian angel-ish.
That's why I
all.
said to keep in mind that that's like experiences will vary. So she became a little bit unstable as they waited out the winter, but she did her fucking job. She kept their communications up and running. And because of that, once the storm eventually fucked off, they were able to pack shit up and go. They said October 28th was the day the storm broke. That's my brother's birthday. And the storm breaks. They're like, okay, cool. We're going to send out 3 snowmobiles to scout ahead. And while they're doing that, we're going to leave some people behind to break down the camp.
Please tell me she was like, I'm out. Take me out. Let me leave.
So she stayed behind to break down the camp
with
a guy named Simon Grimes. And as they were breaking down stuff, one of the last places they went to was the Radio Shack. And they wanted, obviously, their communication center to be like the last thing they broke down, right? So they were doing that. Everything was good to go. They eventually moved forth, and they did complete the expedition. They did go all the way around the world, which is great. But Randolph's journal entry from the last day they were in camp broke down what they were doing, and he talked about speaking to Simon Grimes. He obviously spoke to his wife about what was going on, but there were some details in his journal that freaked people the fuck out, to be frank. And this is his journal entry. I didn't make this up. There's no yo dogs in here. So
okay,
it goes like this, quote. He quotes people in this. So I'll tell you when his journal entry is done. But this is the beginning of the journal entry. No sign of Ginny's ghost, a presence which she felt during the winter. A youngish man, I gather, not malevolent, just there. The long solo nights in the hut, referencing the radio hut, must have enhanced her perception. Grimes, now he's referencing Simon Grimes, described it now as, quote, an empty hut with an aura. I sealed it up as I knew I would not want to go back up there. So that's what Grimes said. He's like, it's a creepy fucking place. It has an aura. I locked it and I sealed it and I'm not going back. The journal entry continues. Before he left, he noticed some graffiti that Ginny had scratched on the wall using 3 different colored pens at different times, he presumed. He found the words, quote, rather scarring in a way. And this is what Ginny had written on the wall of the communications hut. As whistlers and gibbons' cries screech in the ears, the ghost of Rivingen burst into tears. Rivingen's the camp that they set up.
Okay.
Why do you come to disturb me after these many years? I will haunt you and will taunt you and drive you away. So she wrote this like poem on the wall, this like haunting 8-line poem about whatever this thing was that was deliberately like taunting them to try and get them to leave.
Yeah.
And this dude, because he knew what was going on, and he had experienced it to himself, when he read that, it bothered him in a way that he referred to as scarring. Like, that's fucking creepy, dude. And the other thing that blew my mind when I was doing this research is apparently people going crazy in the Antarctic is not rare. Like, early expeditions to, and more importantly, onto the Antarctic continent had sailors who would get off the boat and need to go do stuff, sometimes breaking up the ice if they were trying to get through or circumvent it or whatever. Sometimes like they're actually exploring, but in most cases, what would happen is if they were going out, it would be dark, and after several instances of them going out by themselves, they would come back and they would be horrified, and they would refuse to leave the fucking boat without someone going with them.
Wow.
Because of things they either saw or heard while they're out on the ice.
Interesting.
And like they were really fucking bothered by it. And I'm not just making that up. Like this happened so frequently that explorers that went down there came back with something called the Antarctic stare, which was basically a dissociative stare off into space where people would ask them like, are you okay? And when they snap back to it, they'd be like, sorry, I was thinking of that place, which is like exactly like a dissociative episode from someone who has PTSD. So, like, the bottom of the planet sounds like a horrifying fucking place.
Yeah.
It's not always traumatizing, though. And I do want to point that out. And that's why I included these examples, because a guy named Sir Ernest Shackleton was an Antarctic explorer who headed down there in 1916. So, a long time ago. This is like 105, 106, 108 years ago. So 1916, Sir Ernest Shackleton, he went down there with an expedition team. When they were exploring the continent on foot, there were many instances where he and two of his crew members felt like there was some sort of an unseen presence guiding them. And they didn't feel frightened by it. They felt supported, like it was making sure they were finding their way. He wrote a book, and his book is called South. I have not read it. But in the book, he talks about this frequently, and he gives credit to this unseen presence that they all felt as being the reason they survived the expedition.
Interesting.
They sincerely felt like it was something that was there to make sure they survived. Now, neurologically speaking, when the brain's under stress, it might misfire like a car in winter. Like, if you've ever tried to turn your fucking car on in winter, it's like tick, 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 tick.
No.
It's like, okay, cool. It's not actually the car's fault. It's the fact that it's really fucking cold. So maybe it's the fact that people go down there and they have something happen to their body and their brain physically that causes something odd to happen. But it is very, very creepy that it happens so frequently.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, an incredibly stressful situation or anything. It just, some people have that just happen.
I mean, it usually is involving incredible stress and sometimes physical trauma, because like that's what's happening to these folks that are doing the expedition down in the Antarctic.
Okay.
So it's like, it's a very oppressive physical environment on top of the fact that it's just in general a stressful thing to be doing. So it's typically related to that.
Like the people that go out there now to hang out with, research penguins and do stuff like that. Do you think any of them are like experiencing this? Or?
I know they rotate them out with a certain amount of frequency to prevent things from going buck wild, because they get a little stir crazy if they've been down south for too long.
Okay.
I didn't do too much research on like penguin research or investigators or things like that, so I understand what you're saying, but no, I didn't check to see like what current expeditions experience.
Well, yeah, like those people out there that are making TikTok videos of like freezing ramen and stuff down there, you know.
I mean, I can't imagine that they don't think of it as stressful. Like, it's a very uninhabitable environment while they're there. So the thing that's unique about this sort of phenomenon, though, is that it happens to multiple folks at the same time, you know? It's like group hysteria. Like, group hysteria is totally a thing. I think we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, it's the opposite of hysteria. It's like group calming from an external presence. Not like people being freaked out about something where they hype each other up, but people all feeling like there's something else there that's like helpful. And that seems like a very unique thing. So like talking about third man syndrome in this case, I think is separate from talking about group hysteria. And those are not my only examples, like not by a long shot. You can find a ton of these things out there. There's this thing that happened back at the turn of the millennium. Like I was a young man when it happened. I think you were still a kid. Y2K, not Y2K, 9/11. So for those of you who don't know what 9/11 was, a bunch of planes got hijacked and slammed into a bunch of different things around this country, the United States.
The United States, yeah.
Obviously, the Pentagon was one of them. One of them crashed because the people on one of the flights was just like, fuck this, and they tried to take the flight back, and it crashed. And then the two most notable ones crashed into the Twin Towers in New York. I doubt there's anyone out there who hasn't heard of 9/11, but just in case, that's the long and short of it. So I bring up the towers because there's a guy named Ron DeFrancesco, and I think I'm getting his name right. And he was working on the 84th floor of the South Tower on 9/11, which is not the best place to be. For those of you who don't remember the order, he's in the South Tower. He hears people screaming because there's an explosion. and the North Tower was hit by the first plane. And his account of the event is just crazy to me because I've never thought about like, how did someone in the towers experience it aside from like the horror and shock of like, oh my God, we just got hit by a fucking plane. And he's in the other tower. So when it happens immediately, because they didn't see it happen, everyone thinks this was an accident. So they're getting phone calls from friends and family members like, are you okay? They're like, yeah, I'm in the other tower. We think it was an accident. We think it was like a local plane that lost control.
That was that big?
And then like slowly, but well, like they can't tell. All they see is fucking smoke and they're on the 84th floor. So eventually like a little bit of time goes by and Ron gets a phone call from one of his friends and his friend tells him, you need to get the fuck out of there right now. Because as they're like seeing more footage that's coming out, it's like, that is a commercial plane, dude. Like that is not an accident. They aimed for that fucking tower. You need to get out of the other one. So he tells like his coworkers, we need to get the fuck out of here. And so they go to the elevator. And when they're waiting for the elevator to come get them, the other plane hits their tower. And they thought
above or below?
Here's the thing. They get hit and he says that their immediate mindset was this fucking thing is going to fall over because it lurched 8 feet in one direction when it got hit. And then it came back and went 7 feet in the other direction until it finally settled. And when it settled, they're like, okay, cool. We're still alive. We need to get the fuck out of here. The second plane went in at an angle where it was like pitched. And because of that, they didn't get hit directly. So the body of the plane, this is how lucky this fucking guy is. The body of the plane hit below the 84th floor that he was on. The wing, because it was at an angle, hit the floors above him. So it's like there was this little nook where the 84th floor, this area of the 84th floor didn't get hit.
Wow.
But below them was on fire. And above them was on fire. So they get to the stairwell and they open it and there's just smoke pouring out of it. And it's people coming from the floors below. Going up. Because they're like, there's no way down. The floor's on fire. Like, there's nothing we can do. So they're like, we'll go up. So they go up and they get some more fires. They're like, because the fucking angle was there. They're basically trapped in the 84th floor.
Okay.
So they're trying to figure out, like, what the fuck are we going to do? So once they realize there's no way to go up, he's like, I fucking down it is, I guess. So he grabs a piece of drywall and he's like, I'm just going to use this as a shield to get past the fucking fire and the smoke. And he's like pushing through and he feels himself being burned from the fucking fire. And he's thinking to himself, he's like, I'm going to die. Yeah. Like, this is how I'm going to die. I can't breathe. I can't see. All I know is I can go down and I'm literally walking through fire to do this. And as he's realizing to himself, like, this is how I die, he said he heard a voice telling him, keep going. Like, keep moving forward, move forward. And he hears this voice and he keeps going because of it.
I got chills, bro.
He got to the point where he's like, I should just lay down because this is too much. This is too painful and I don't want to die in this much pain. But he heard this voice, so he kept going. And he keeps going and keeps going until he hears another voice further down the stairwell, and it's a firefighter. And the firefighter tells him, like, get to me, get to me. He gets to him, and the firefighter tells him, like, are you okay? And he tells him, like, I think I'm burned, but I can't tell because I can't see anything because his eyes have been so fucked up by the smoke.
Oh, man.
So the firefighter tells him, like, just keep following the stairwell down, and once you get to the bottom, like, they'll take care of you. So he goes all the way down. He gets to the base of the fucking South Tower, right? 84 floors down. He gets there. The firefighters are like, you know, he tries to leave the building and they tell him, like, no, you can't leave. Like, stay right where you're at. And he's like at the doors of the South Tower. And the reason they're saying this is because there's so much debris falling that he'll die if he tries to get out. And they also told him, like, there's people jumping and they might land on you. So they told him, go to the basement and exit that way. Because if you go in the basement, there's like ways that you can get out onto the street where you won't be exposed to falling debris and, you know, people jumping. And so he goes to the basement. And when he gets to the fucking basement, the tower collapses. So the last thing he remembers is running down a hallway and a giant ball of fire following him. And then he blacks out. He wakes up in the hospital weeks later. And like
weeks later,
and he is fucked up. He got burned like almost all over his entire body.
So they put him in like a coma.
Yeah. And he's regarded as the last known survivor of the South Tower.
Wow.
He is the last person to make it out alive. And he told his story, and this is like when Third Man Syndrome kind of like kicked up in the early 2000s. It wasn't called that at the time. Everyone just like, oh, it was a guardian angel pushing him forward, you know? But that's like his specific story of like, I don't know what it was. I've never heard it before. I've never heard it since. but it's the only reason I kept going. It's the only reason I'm alive. And it's just like, fuck, dude. Like, that's intense as shit. And there's a lot of stories. I really wanted to tell that one kind of in its entirety because it seems like one worth telling, you know? But I'm going to keep going though. Like, there's this guy named James Savegny. I think I'm saying his name right. And he was a mountaineer, which means you climb mountains and shit. And in 1978, he was climbing a mountain with a friend of his, and they got hit by a fucking avalanche. And they didn't just get like kind of hit or buried. They got hit, and it took them 2,000 feet from the spot they were before it struck and buried them. He got out and he looked around. He found his friend, and his friend was dead. And he realized he himself was in a ton of pain. At that point, when he removed himself from the snow, he had his back broken in 2 different places. His knees had been bent backwards when he was struck. So all the ligaments in his knees, his ACL, his MCL, I think there's a PCL in there too. They were all torn, so he couldn't really stand without extreme pain. His teeth were broken. He was bleeding internally, but he didn't know it. He just knew he was in extraordinary pain and he could not stand. And he was just like,
how do you get down there?
He was just like, I'm going to die. Because he's still on the fucking mountain, you know? He's like, there's no fucking way I'm making it down. And he just laid there and told himself, like, just lay here. Maybe someone will come get you. Eventually you'll fall unconscious and die. And he heard a voice that told him, you can't give up, you have to try. That's an exact quote. You can't give up, you have to try. It wasn't his internal monologue. It wasn't him pepping like self up. He said he heard this come from something else that was there with him. So he got up and he started to descend down the mountain, and he was super disoriented to the point where like he didn't even know if he was moving forward. And the voice told him, follow the blood dripping from the tip of your nose. It's an arrow pointing the way. So he basically just kept moving forward. Wow. And what he said is he felt this presence while he was walking, standing behind him just over his right shoulder, telling him like, keep going, keep going, keep going, 1 foot in front of the other. At some point he was so weak he started to crawl, and he made it to base camp. And when he got to base camp, this part's crazy to me too. When he got to base camp, like the medical people rushed over to help him because they knew he was up there when this shit happened. And the presence departed. Like he felt it leave. And no one else has mentioned the presence going away, but eventually it does go away. And when the presence departed, this dude who's like fucked up beyond belief said what he felt in that moment was overcome with loneliness. Aww. Like it had left him. And that's something that he recalled more than the injuries he had sustained.
What if it's something that you always carry with you? Like, you know, like Spider-Man's like, you always, everybody gets one.
What? And I don't remember this line from Spider-Man at all.
Really?
Everybody gets one?
Everybody gets one. Like the original Tobey Maguire ones, when he saves somebody and they're like, oh my God, it's Spider-Man, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, everybody gets one.
I don't remember him
Or maybe it's the cartoon.
I don't remember him telling them, like, after this, I'm going to let you die. Like, if I see someone holding you at gunpoint, I'm like, maybe
it's Family Guy.
I'm going to swing by you and go, everybody gets one.
It might be Family Guy. I don't remember. But
yeah, it's definitely not the fucking movie.
Maybe it's something where everybody has this entity with them, and when you need it the most, it's like, okay, I'm here to help you. All right, I'm out.
Yeah.
You know?
And I don't know what this is. Obviously, it's something that's just open for speculation, but these stories are pretty incredible. And there's more. Like this guy named Peter Hillary who went up Mount Everest. It's a lot of people who go into really cold fucking places, by the way. And he's the son of someone named Sir Edmund Hillary, which was another mountaineer and like super fucking rich guy and philanthropist. And he reported a sensation of like someone accompanying him during an ascent of Everest where it got super dangerous, where he thought he was going to die. And he felt as though someone was climbing alongside him, offering him support when he couldn't find like handholds or what he could do to like go up or down. Again, like cold temperatures, maybe it's just fucking with your brain. This dude named Steve Callahan, who was adrift at sea in 1982. So he took a boat he built that he had been sailing around a ton and was trying to cross, I think, the Pacific Ocean. And
on a boat he built.
His boat got damaged and he had a life raft on it. So he gathered up what he could while it was sinking, got on the life raft, and he was able to collect rainwater. And he had a spear, I think, for fishing. And so he was able to survive for 76 days adrift on this life raft. And during that, he reported as though he felt someone else on the raft with him, like when he was scared or lonely or just thinking like, I'm going to fucking die out here. He just felt like someone was on the boat with him. And it's kind of funny to me because like, I think like when I'm home alone sometimes, like I think one of the dogs is laying on my feet and I'll look down, there's nothing there. And I'm like, oh, it's Yui. It's our dog that passed away. Like, oh, she just came in here because she knew I was bored or lonely. And I think that's sort of like what kicked up for this dude, and in a lot of cases kicks up for folks who are in like these situations. But it's interesting to me too, because like this reminds me of something that's a very famous example of this in movies, which is funny because like when I was still doing research for this topic, my mom was watching Castaway.
Oh, yeah?
So I walked outside and she was watching Castaway on the TV.
Wilson!
And I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. Because like as the audience, you know, that's a fucking volleyball. That is not a person.
But he
That's
treats
a
it as a
volleyball
person.
that he's talking to. And it's meant to be there as like a tool in this movie to show you the depths of his isolation and his loneliness and his fear. And you're 100% aware as an audience member that this volleyball is not actually talking to him, and you just can't hear the voice. He's talking to himself. You know, that's how the movie plays out. And you can think of this, you can think of third man syndrome as like, oh, this kind of sounds stupid, this kind of sounds like bullshit. But if you watch Castaway, when you get to the part when that fucking volleyball floats away from him in the ocean, it is heartbreaking. And you know it's just a fucking volleyball. But I kind of understand that whole like sense of extreme loneliness because it was the only thing like keeping you company. And I just remembered the fucking example I was going to talk to my mom about yesterday when I saw her watching Castaway, that I was so excited to talk to her about it and left my brain. It's from the show Alone, where these people go out into the wilderness that's eventually going to get very cold. And it's about the last person standing, and you can like tap out by taking out a satellite phone and being like, come get me.
Is it the guy who becomes friends with the squirrel?
Yes. There's a guy in like season 2 or 3 who's doing fairly well, and he becomes friends with this squirrel. And most people just hunt whatever is out there to eat immediately. And there's a squirrel there that he's just like, that's fine, the squirrel can hang out. And he talks to the squirrel a ton. And he gets to the point where he has no food left and it's really cold and he's starving.
It's just him and the squirrel.
And it's just him and the squirrel. And the squirrel is so used to his presence, the squirrel continuously comes close to him and he kills the squirrel. And he eats the squirrel.
And he leaves.
And then he has a fucking emotional breakdown because he literally keeps saying like, I killed my friend. And it bothers him so much that he quits the competition. And like that is a really good real life example if you want to watch it on a show called Alone, where someone just attributed all these things we're talking about to a fucking squirrel that's just like, you see so many of these things killed on this fucking show for food, and you know this dude is like near organ failure is how much weight he's lost, and he has to do this to survive, but he is so heartbroken by what he did. And it's just like that. It's 100% third man syndrome. But like when it's like he started that as a way to keep himself from being lonely versus like just feeling like something was there to tell you to keep going.
Yeah.
So that's the best example I can give you of the things that I've seen in media, like Castaway and Alone. So check those out if you get a chance. I don't think third man syndrome is really something that's up for dispute. I think what's up for dispute is what you think is happening, whether you think it's psychological, whether you think it's neurological, whether you think it's some sort of like religious or theological thing happening to you to keep you moving forward. I think even if you could nail down like the chemistry of what's happening in your brain to show this is exactly why you feel this way, it could just be us explaining through science how some force can influence you and guide you that you can't see. You know, like how you could be influenced by someone or something that's on a different plane of existence, which is just a way for me to say, like, it still could be all of these things at once, you know? Or it's just a bunch of scared people talking to themselves, which is also totally fucking acceptable, because you got to do what you got to do to get through the hard times in life. So that was very long, I get that, but I hope you enjoyed it. That, my spooky friends, was Third Man Syndrome.
All right, and that's the episode. Thank you. Goodbye.
She makes that joke every time my fucking topic goes long. But yeah, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back with Robin's topic.
All right, everybody, welcome to my half of the episode. This is going to be a really long one for you folks this week. It's going to be like an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes.
I mean, it's January Patreon push. We might as well be pushing it to the limit.
Okay, so this episode, I am going to be covering a haunted hotel. I think it's a nice turn down, you know, a side street from Adam's topic here. It's been a while since I've covered a haunted location, I think. I think I've been skirting around haunted locations, maybe. I've done true crime and some weird other things, maybe. I don't remember.
She doesn't remember any of
all
the
topics. Episodes are blending together. But
I checked in 2 different locations to make sure we haven't covered this particular hotel before. We're in the green, so let her rip, Robin.
This hotel is one that I've never been to before, and this is rare for me to say, but I wouldn't mind going if someone was like, hey, come stay here, record an episode from here. I'm like not like I'm sending out vibes, but I would be down, if somebody
sounds like you're sending out vibes.
if somebody was like, hey, come to the Chelsea, because today I'm covering the Chelsea in New York City. So it's actually called Hotel Chelsea, but a lot of people just call it the Chelsea.
Can I do the thing you do and ask you a question that might be later on your script?
Yeah, what's up?
Is this the hotel from Home Alone 2?
I don't know.
Where Kevin McAllister meets Donald Trump?
Isn't that like the Plaza or something?
I don't fucking know. That's why I asked you.
I'm pretty sure his is like the Plaza or some fancy ass hotel. It is not this one.
Okay.
But this one is located at 222 West 23rd Street. And I never grew up anywhere with this many numbered streets and lettered streets. So I would totally get lost in New York really easily, even though everybody is always just like, just follow the numbers.
It's a fucking grid system, dude.
But it's like you have 23rd Street and then you have like 100 something street.
Yeah.
That's
they go really high.
Freaking crazy to me. When we were in New York, we just took a taxi to wherever we had to go
Or the subway.
I
remember we were on the subway and we didn't realize we got on the express. And we went way too far north.
And then we had to go back
around. And we went back around. I didn't tell Robin, but it's like, I remember from my youth watching a movie named Jackie Brown. And the movie Jackie Brown, there's a song that I think gets played multiple times called Across 110th Street. Because once you cross 110th Street, you're in the more lower income areas where some crazy shit can happen. And by the time we got off the express, we were like 136th Street. And I was like, we crossed 110th Street. That one song told me not to do that.
So anyway, the hotel is located in the neighborhood of, you would probably be able to guess, Chelsea, in Manhattan. So this is kind of like in the heart of New York City. And it's supposedly the second most haunted place in New York City.
I hate these things that claim that shit.
So the second most haunted place in New York City, behind the New York Public Library on 42nd Street.
Which is the library, I'm pretty sure.
Ghostbusters?
From Ghostbusters.
Okay. I was going to assume that when I read that. I was like, it's got to be that same library. Anyway, this hotel was built in between 1883 and 1884. It officially opened in 1884. And you can just imagine the history that this icon of a hotel has seen. It's 12 stories, and just looking at it, even though it's not like the surrounding skyscrapers and fancy office structures or anything like that, you just know that there's a story with this building just by looking at it. It's so cool. Adam will post pictures on our Instagram, but the building really is, I think it's gorgeous. I think it's a very pretty building, but maybe that's me and I'm weird like that. But it's a classic. It's so cool. It used to be a housing co-op, so it didn't used to always be a hotel. And I'd never heard of a housing co-op before, but I guess it's when a bunch of people kind of invest into something together. And they all are given a right to have a unit within these buildings. So you purchase something as
like a big ass condo. It's like you're buying an apartment building.
Yeah. And so everybody comes together but buys it as one entity. So I thought that's pretty cool. There were people that called this, this building home even into the 2000s. So it didn't always used to be this hotel for just people coming through. Writers and artists, varying musicians and entertainers have all roamed these halls. The list of notable residents is innumerable. There's just so many people that come and go through this hotel, this building, all of its history. And these days it is labeled as a luxury hotel. And I say luxury, but TripAdvisor says it's a 2-star hotel.
I was going to say your luxury was definitely in quotation marks. I don't know if you could hear those.
Yeah, but TripAdvisor says it's a 2-star hotel. I don't know if that's considered luxury. I don't know. The pictures make it look really nice online. Like the apartment suites. Like I wished our kitchen looked like the apartment suites in this hotel. But I would not pay $500 a night for the size of their petite queen room. It's like the bed and this much space on either side of the bed.
She says this much. She's like drawing about an inch with her.
It's tiny. There's like
forefinger in
basically
her
like
thumb.
no space to move on either side of the bed.
It sounds like the hotel room in Japan that we were in, which was very small.
The hotel room in Japan, we had more room because we could drag our suitcase to the side.
There's enough space for a chair and a suitcase. Yes, this is correct.
But anyway, though the hotel is best known for the clientele that's been throughout the years, there is a dark history to it. Things have happened in this building. There are paranormal, supernatural stories about guests and residents past. Some people talk of strange sounds or eerie vibes. People see things like those that were there before never left. So in 1978, someone named Nancy Spungen, I think it's Spungen. She was the girlfriend of Sid Vicious. Like,
oh, Nancy and Sid.
Sid and Nancy,
Gotcha.
yeah. So the Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, she was found dead in the bathroom of room 100, their room. Sid and Nancy's relationship, if you guys aren't aware of who
Very
they are,
Adam and Robin.
they are no, they are an iconic couple in rock and roll. Like,
Yeah.
if you hear Sid and Nancy, there is only one Sid and Nancy. Like, that's just how it is. But their relationship wasn't a model relationship of just, hearts and flowers. It was domestic violence and drug use. It was very unhealthy. On October 12th, 1978, she was found to have been stabbed in the stomach and found dead in the bathroom of their shared room. Sid was arrested and charged with her murder, but he died 4 months after her death from a drug overdose before any trial could ever even take place for her murder. There's still speculation if he was the actual culprit that did it. I don't know what the controversy is there. Like, did he always say, like, it wasn't me, or before he died, did he tell someone, like, yeah, bro, I stabbed her, or something like that?
It's definitely a true crime topic for a different episode, perhaps.
Maybe, but I already told you guys all the goods.
I mean, you told us how it ends, for sure.
But yeah, I think that's fascinating. That happened there. Her spirit is said to still reside within the Chelsea. Guests that stay in or near room 100 report hearing unexplainable sounds, sudden cold spots, and an overall sense of unease as if they're being watched. And that's the stuff that they say comes from her. So, of course, the opposing entity has to be around as well, right? Of course, somebody has to say Sid Vicious is also there. So he is said to have been seen around as well. He's more as a fleeting shadow, something like you kind of see out of the corner of your eye, more like a vague figure than you actually seeing him in his entirety. And you would know if you saw him. He's very iconic looking. Those that have seen him say they feel like a really intense sadness or dread when they see him. So, I wonder why Sid's ghost comes with the dread and sadness. Maybe they feel dread because he murdered Nancy,
That would make sense, yeah.
Or, I don't know. Who knows?
And the sadness is coming from him because he murdered Nancy.
Maybe. But that's if this spirit or entity is actually him. So, then there's Dylan Thomas, who was a Welsh poet who died while residing at the Chelsea in 1953. He died when he was only 38 years old. Some say that he died because of his extensive alcohol abuse. Some say it was pneumonia that got him, but he didn't actually die in the building per se, but he died after spending a few days, like he was there at the hotel. He was staying at the hotel. He was spending a few days drinking with his friends. They were in and out of the room. Like, he would drink at the hotel room. He would go out drinking. He would come back, drink more. His ghost is said to roam around all his usual haunts within the Chelsea. He's mostly commonly seen near room 206, which was his room.
Didn't Dylan Thomas write the poem? I don't remember the name of it. That's You Have to Rage Against the Dying of the Light. Rage at the Dying of the Light. I'm pretty sure that's him. I wish I remember the name
I
of the
don't
poem.
know. I'm not sure.
I'm going to check it. I have to check
Okay.
it. It's going to bother me if I don't. Yep, just a quick check. Totally. 100% correct. I'm such
Wow,
a
how did you know that?
Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night is the name of it by Dylan Thomas.
That's not the speech from Independence Day?
I mean, he says something similar to that, but no. Honestly, I'll tell you exactly how I knew that. It's not because I'm so well read. It's because I've seen the movie Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer, which is based on a true story, where she tells her kids if they can find a connection between one of Dylan Thomas's poems and one of Bob Dylan's songs, they win the Dylan contest, where she's going to take them to dinner or some shit.
Oh.
And the connection is, I can't remember what Bob Dylan song it is, but it's connected to that poem.
Wow.
So there you go. That's how I remember that. Thanks,
cool.
Michelle Pfeiffer.
I still haven't seen Independence Day, so.
It's such a fucking tragedy because that movie is amazing. Will Smith punches an alien in the face and says, "Welcome to Earth."
He does that in Men in Black.
Do you know why he was in Men in Black? Because Independence Day was such a fucking masterpiece. They're like, we need another movie with Will Smith and aliens.
Okay, anyway, so yes, so he's commonly seen near room 206, which is where he stayed before his death. Those that have seen him describe a spectral figure that resembles Thomas. I think he also is very iconic looking. If you see a picture of him, you'd be like, oh, okay. He's seen wandering the hallways or gazing out of room 206, like out of the window of that particular room. Those that witness him claim that they feel a sense of melancholy, which poet, I would assume, does give off melancholy vibes. So there's a ghost that has been named Mary that has been tied to the hotel. The ghost is said to be that of a woman whose husband died on the Titanic. There are stories that she traveled to New York City from Buffalo to welcome her husband home. Like he was in England, was taking the Titanic back to New York. So she was there to meet him when the boat came in. Obviously, guys, we all know what happens to the Titanic never shows up.
Just fine, right?
No, the Titanic never shows up.
Agree to disagree. Mandela effect.
It said she was so distraught over the death of her husband, and she was depressed and was never able to adjust back to the everyday life. And she eventually hanged herself in her room on the 5th floor. Her ghost has been reportedly seen numerous times over the years, and one of the most notable sightings is by Michael Imperioli. That's
an actor, right?
Yes.
From The Sopranos, right?
He is from Sopranos. He plays Christopher Moltisanti on The Sopranos. He lived there for about 2 months in the 1990s and said that late one night he saw a woman who was hunched over and looked like she was crying. He walked up to her and asked if she was okay, but as soon as he did that, he heard a loud pop. And he turned around to look at what it was. A light bulb had popped and plunged the hallway into darkness. He turned back to the woman and she was gone.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm also going to show you a picture of Michael Imperioli because you might recognize him. I don't know if he's been in any of the things.
He's also iconic.
Yeah, I don't know what it is that you've seen him in, but like he's in so much shit for sure.
I believe that. Because I have seen him before. I just don't know what I've seen him from. But anyway, so this ghost, Mary, she's known to appear at the west end of the building where there's an archway on the 5th floor hallway. And this area is where the original apartment's entryway would have been. And she's seen checking herself in the mirror. Like she's just this vain ghost, apparently.
That's kind of like, it's kind of cool though that you have an activity that you're known for. Like, if you could have an activity as a ghost where they're like, oh, it's the so-and-so ghost. Like, I don't there's a ghost that shows up outside that, like, flicks a cigarette, pops his collar up, walks away, and disappears into the night. That's fucking cool. That's all I'm saying. Like, checking yourself out in the mirror. There's stuff that I'm just like, all right, that's not bad. Not a bad way to spend eternity.
But she is known to be, like, a grumpy ghost. Like, she does not like talking to people or anything like that. She's known to be more of a grumpy gills. 10 years after Mary, after her death, I think, there was a woman named Nadia, and she was a woman in her 20s who jumped out the window facing 23rd Street. So before this woman jumped, she had cut off her right hand with
Jesus
a large,
Christ.
like, industrial set of scissors or a cutter or something like that. And it's assumed she couldn't handle the pain, so she jumped. But why she cut off her hand? Okay, so she was an artist. She lived like a spoiled life. She grew up in the Chelsea. Her family was rich. She met a handsome songwriter. They both, oh God. They both run off together and get married in their teens. Okay. Within a couple years of marriage, her husband becomes an alcoholic. She ends up with 2 kids and a husband who can't take care of himself. He's a freaking alcoholic. It's like she has 3 kids at this point. So she goes to her dad. She pleads with him and says, hey, can I come back home? She wants to come back to the Chelsea. It's his daughter, right? So he's just like, yeah, okay, come back home. But the condition of her coming on, she can come back home on the condition that
she cuts off her hand.
She be in charge of all the housework and all the cleaning. So she has to do all the housework.
A fate worse than death.
She has to do all the housework, all the cleaning. She has to sew. So she has to bring in sewing projects to bring in more money for the family. She has to take care of her incontinent mom on top of that.
That's rough.
And so her hands, as an artist, it's really rough on your hands to do all this stuff constantly, washing constantly. And her hands were becoming, they described it as being ruined by all this work, all this never-ending housework.
She's an artist, but it's not like she's a hand model. Like usually artists' hands
have
calluses and become rough based off the things that they're doing.
Imagine doing, back then, I don't think they had, washers and dryers like we do now. She's hand doing everything. Imagine all that pressure on the tendons in your hand. I can barely hold chopsticks for a long time anymore. It hurts my wrist too much.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's I don't know.
That sounds like something you should see the doctor for.
I'm also 30.
Just don't cut your hands off to deal with it is my suggestion.
I'm also turning 35 this year, so maybe, I'm just getting old. But anyway, she's so upset by her hands, getting maybe her wrists or whatever. So she freaking snaps one day and cuts off her hand. That's the story. That's the legend, okay?
Yeah, this story's pretty fucking thin, dog.
So now her one-handed ghost is seen.
It's like I had a really bad migraine, so I decapitated myself.
So now this one-handed ghost is seen flitting about on the outside of the upper floor windows on moonless nights. And people see her long hair and her flowing gown. Like she can't get back into the hotel. It's like she relives that same horrible thing over and over again. But that's the story. Okay, so there are strange sounds, disembodied whispers, the sound of ghostly steps down empty corridors. Even the sound of music can be heard within this hotel. And not necessarily, the music from the movie starring Julie Andrews.
I almost made that joke.
Yeah, the sound of music. But just some music that seems to be coming from thin air. There are sounds of what sounds like parties happening too, but there's no parties happening. These voices sometimes sound like fights or arguments. There are hushed conversations that leave people that hear this feeling really unsettled. There are those sudden cold spots that happen that are, I guess, indicative of ghosts. But it is a hotel and there's vents everywhere. You never know. These cold areas experienced throughout the hotel are sometimes associated with the feeling of being touched or caressed by unseen hands. Now, it could be sexy. But in this case, I don't think it is. I don't think this is going to be part of that sexiest podcast that Adam's starting.
Sexy-ish. Thank you.
But yeah, something that would definitely freak me out are the reports that guests will see unexpected reflections in mirrors. So they'll see figures and faces that will quickly vanish. I have a big fear of seeing things in mirrors. So if I'm feeling uncomfortable somewhere, I will make an effort to not look in the mirror. If I'm in a restroom, I won't look in the mirror. I'll wash my hands looking down or something and then run out of the bathroom. And I know you and our friend Ralph can attest to how quick I can be in a bathroom because We went to that Cheesecake Factory
Oh man,
one time.
It took me longer to walk to the bathroom than it took me to walk to and use the bathroom.
Because I ran out of there, dude. I was just like,
why were you freaked out? Is it because we were just talking about scary stuff?
We were talking about scary stuff. It was really dark in there. I was by myself.
The Cheesecake Factory bathroom ghost.
Okay. Okay. Look, there are some bathrooms where I'm not scared of at all. Like when I go to work, our bathroom at work is fine. I go to the bathroom, I do my thing by myself.
You're a liar. You're afraid to shit in public. We all know this.
Oh, okay. I'm afraid to shit in public, but that's a different problem. Also, my coworker is going to show me the bathroom that no one ever goes to, so I'm very excited about that. But when I worked at Disney and we had an office bathroom, we had a number of them on our floor. But I was afraid of that bathroom. I would run out of that bathroom.
Wow.
There was a mirror in there that I would refuse to like look into. I don't know why.
It's probably the tortured souls of the toilets that have been just absolutely punished in there.
That building that I worked in though was haunted. Straight up. Actually haunted.
Interesting. Haunted Disney. You heard it here first.
There are so many ghosts at Disney, okay? We've done this episode already.
We haven't done your experience as Disney. I'm just saying we should probably cover that one day.
What other experiences other than that?
You just brought up shit we didn't even know. What other secrets are you hiding, Robin?
None. Anyway, but yeah, so people will see things in mirrors at this hotel. An artist was said to have died in the hotel, and his ghost is said to still roam the halls. This building obviously is no stranger to having artists coming through, and this particular ghost has been described as a shadowy figure that walks around carrying art supplies. And this ghost apparently appears more often to artists than other guests and people coming through. Artists that stay at the Chelsea claim they've spoken to some unseen muse or some sort of presence that guides their work. And they have sudden bursts of inspiration or unexplained creative visions.
That's super fucking cool,
yeah,
actually.
they feel like they're watched over, like they're being watched over while they work on
Sounds
their
like
art.
Third man syndrome, if you ask
That's
me.
why I was like, what? But it's no surprise that novelists, poets, playwrights, they all have spent time here. Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2001, A Space Odyssey while staying there.
Wow.
Musical groups like The Kills, I've never listened to them, but they're from England, so I wouldn't know. But they've written songs there as well. These sounds that come through this hotel, they happen late at night, mostly around rooms that are known for these tragic and significant historical events, like room 100 and 206. So if you want a view of these haunts up close, I guess maybe you can request these rooms, but Sid and Nancy's room actually got split into 2 units to prevent it from being turned into a shrine. Because imagine keeping that one room, people would be there like, oh my god, it's Sid and Nancy's room. I feel like it's so they can
rent Sid and Nancy's room twice.
I don't know, you never know.
Instead of just once.
But now you guys are smart enough to know it's not Sid and Nancy's room. So if they're saying like, oh yeah, we'll book you Sid and Nancy's room, be like, bitch, I know it got separated into 2 units. Don't lie to me.
I mean, that just means 2 units are haunted to me. One has Sid and one has Nancy. It makes sense.
No, we've already discussed this. Ghosts travel their same circles, so they could just walk through the walls.
I mean, that's just your theory. Just saying.
Anyway, the hotel's gone under renovations and new management. Like at a point, I think at some point it went through a bankruptcy or something like that. But because of all this new stuff, it's kind of been brought into the modern era. And guests at the hotel still report inexplicable occurrences. So ghosts are ghosts. They're going to ghost. It still stands as a historic building with iconic architecture. It is a real, like, New York City landmark. It's actually a national and state landmark building, so I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. But she's beauty and she's grace.
I hate you so much. I thought you were going to be like, so let's hear it for New York.
But
instead you went with fucking Miss United States, a fictional pageant from Miss Congeniality.
But these events woven into the fabric of the Chelsea Hotel's history.
Miss New York doesn't even win Miss United States. Holy shit. I'm just so offended right now.
Oh my god, it's such a good movie. If you guys have not seen Miss Congeniality, it is so good. But these things contribute to the reputation of this hotel as a haven for the supernatural and the unexplained, continuing to intrigue and mystify visitors and residents alike.
Interesting. That is fascinating. I really do like covering haunted hotels because there's so many fucking units and there's so many people coming in and out of those hotels. So, one, there's just a huge potential for ghosts, for people who have had something tragic or horrible, they just died there, to have happened in the past. And then more people, so many people, to have like experienced something from going there. So, good stuff.
Yeah.
Good topic, Robin.
Thanks.
All right. So, yeah, I think that's everything we have for this episode of Scaryish. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a story you'd like to share with us, it doesn't necessarily have to be about Third Man Syndrome or the Chelsea Hotel, but it could be about just about anything supernatural, spiritual, coincidental, paranormal, true crime, or extraterrestrial in nature. Feel free to reach out to us by emailing storytime@scaryish.com or going to our website, scaryish.com, clicking on Contact Us. Fill out that form. It comes directly to us, or hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod, and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do it since it's January Patreon push?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish podcast. I'm really excited because you guys are going to have like a little mini tidbitty that Adam's going to upload with this
our discussion
episode.
During the commercial break.
Yeah, you guys will have fun listening to that.
It's nothing about what we covered through this episode. We're not hiding the content behind a paywall.
No,
it's random.
It's literally just us talking. This is like going to be, you guys will get to hear what we literally talk about outside
you
of
hear the
podcast.
random bullshit that floats through our heads? Yeah, that's what that's about.
So you guys will have fun with that. So if you guys want to join and listen to us be dumb, you can do that. If you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to coffee, ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast. And those are one-time donations. We just really appreciate everybody helping us out and keeping this podcast going. We're going on, this will be our 8th year going through, right? 7th year?
7th, I believe. We started in 2017.
So, yeah. So we've been doing this for a while and we really couldn't be here without you guys. So every time Adam has January Patreon push, we really...
just me. I get to keep all that money. Robin doesn't see a dime of it. No, not really.
Well, a lot of it goes into me actually making the merch for Patreon.
She takes all of it.
For our Badge of Honor patrons and above, because I try to make really cool stuff for you. And we want to have fun with everyone, and it kind of just helps us keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much to everyone who donates, everyone who doesn't, that supports us by telling your friends or family members to listen, reaches out to us through social media, just interacts with us. It means the world to us, and we appreciate you. So, yeah, we hope you enjoyed the episode. That's everything we have for number 284, I think this one was. So, Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.